This lesson goes over how to solve problems that deal with percents. So just a little bit of background of some stuff that we need to make sure we understand. When we're talking about 100%, 100% represents the amount in the entire group. So if we had everything. Whole means the amount of the group. So if we had a class of 22 people and 100% are present, the whole would be 22. The part represents the portion of the group that you have out of the whole. So going back to that group, if we were talking about a group of 22 and we were asking what percent are absent, and there's 2 people absent, 2 would represent the part. So let's look at a problem. So my family took a road trip for our summer vacation, and we plan to drive a total of 3,500 miles for the trip. After 1 week, we have driven 1,250 miles. What percent of the trip have we completed so far? Well, before we go ahead and we start solving the problem, let's look at how we can set one up using a tool, proportion. Remember, a percentage is a special ratio that is talking about a percent out of 100 or a specific value out of 100. If we had everything, it would be 100 out of 100. If we had half, it would be 50 out of 100, 50%, 100%. When we're talking about that percentage being 100, 100 represents the whole entire group. And in this case, if we're talking about a trip, it would be the number of miles we would drive if we went through the entire trip. The percent represents the portion we have or the part we have out of the whole. Or in this case, when we're talking about our trip, it's how much have we driven so far out of the whole entire trip. So let's go ahead and use this percent proportion to figure out our answer. So when we go to set up our proportion, we have to think about where everything goes. Now, we know that in our percent proportion, 100 always is going to go there. Okay, so remember the denominator on the right side is always going to be 100 because it's always representing 100%. Above it is where we're going to go ahead and we're going to put the percentage we have out of the whole. Okay, the whole, remember, represents the amount you would have if you had 100%, and the part represents how much you have out of the whole. So we know 100 has to go in the bottom right. But according to the question, it's asking us what percent, which means we don't know right now what the percentage is, which means we need a variable to represent it. So I'm going to let P, and off to the side, I'm going to put percent of trip. So I'm defining my variable. So what part of the trip have I completed? Well, according to the problem, it says the total is going to be 3,500 miles. And we have driven 1,250 miles so far. So the whole trip is going to take me 3,500 miles. That represents 100% of my trip. So when it's completed, I've gone 3,500 miles. So far, I've only driven 1,250 miles, so that represents my percentage. Now, to solve a proportion, we can go ahead and do a few different things. But for this one, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cross multiply. So first I'm going to do 1,250 times 100. And so I get 1,250 times 100, which is 125,000, or 125,000, equals 3,500 times P, which is just 3,500 times P. And now I'm trying to get P by itself. So I'm going to do the inverse of multiplying by 3,500, which is to divide by 3,500. And I do that to each side of the equation. Then I go ahead and do the arithmetic. So I do 125,000 divided by 3,500, which gives me approximately, we're going to round to the tenths here, P is approximately 35 7/10. So now I'm going to write my answer in the form of a sentence. So my question is, what percent of the trip have we completed so far? We have completed about 35 7/10% of our trip. Okay, let's do a couple more problems. Okay, so you get a test back, quiz, something like that, and you want to know what your grade is because your teacher only told you that it's a certain number out of so many points. So remember that in our percent proportion, 100 always goes in the bottom right because that's 100%. I don't know what my percentage is, so I'm going to put P because I don't know it. And then I know that Janae earned 15 points on her test. The test was worth 18 points. So if she got 100%, how many points would she have earned? She would have earned 18 points. But she didn't. She only earned 15. So that's our part. The whole is 18 because it represents what she would get if she made 100. 15 represents what she actually earned. So now we're going to go ahead and solve. So since I don't know 18 times what makes 100, I'm going to cross multiply. 18 times P, 100 times 15. So I have 18 times P equals 1500. So now I'm going to do the inverse of multiplying by 18, which is to divide. And when I do 1500 divided by 18, I get P is 83.3 repeating. So what grade did Janae make? So Janae made an 83% on her test. So it would be about a B. So statisticians often have to go ahead and talk about data, especially population data. So the city of Daegu in South Korea represents about 5% of South Korea's population. If about 52 million persons live in South Korea, what's the approximate population of Daegu? Okay, so let's go ahead and think of this in terms of our percent proportion. So we have 100, and we have a percentage, we have a part and a whole. So it's asking us what's the approximate population of Daegu. And remember, Daegu is part of South Korea. So that means Daegu has to be on top and South Korea has to be on the bottom. So South Korea's population is 52 million, and we're just going to go ahead and leave this in millions. So we'll put 52. And South Korea, the only thing we know about Daegu's population, and the only thing we know about Daegu's population is that it represents 5% of South Korea. So we know the percentage this time, but what we don't know is Daegu's population. So I'm going to use D for Daegu. So D equals Daegu population. So now I'm ready to solve. So again, I don't know what 52 times what makes to make 100. So I'm going to cross multiply. Now I actually don't need this percent symbol here, and I don't want to use it. I want to use it as the number 5. So don't include the percent when you're given it in a proportion. And we have 100 times D. So that means I have 100 times D, 52 times 5, 260. So now I'm ready to go ahead and solve. So I'm going to divide both sides by 100, because 100 times D divided by 100 is going to give me D alone. Divide the other side by 100, and now I have 100 divided by 100 is 1 times D, which is just D. And then 260 divided by 100 would give me 2 6/10. So that means Daegu has a population of about 2 and 6/10 millions, or 2,600,000 persons. Now, sometimes percent problems aren't given to us in a long form. It's just asking us, what's this percent of blah, blah, blah. So we always have 100, no matter how we're setting it up. Sometimes what we're going to see is the word what. What is going to indicate to us where our variable goes. Okay, so for example, if I had something like, what is 2% of 80? Or what percent of 32 is 18? So there's different ways I could go ahead and I could write it. But 100 always is going to go there. The value, if we're given the percent, would go above my 100. Of always tells me where my whole is always tells me my part. So we can use this percent ratio to kind of help us decipher things. Is over of is percent over 100. So let's go ahead and do one example. Okay, so I know 100 goes here. I'm given the percentage, which is 5, so that's going to go over 100. I'm taking the percentage of something I don't know. So of goes in the bottom, which means I need a variable. And is 35 means if I take 5%, I'll get 35. So now I've had it set up and ready to solve. 5 times x is 100 times 35, or 3,500. Solve by dividing both sides by 5. And I get x is 700. So the answer, 35 is 5% of what number? Means 35 is 5% of 700.